Hello again. Today I'll be descending into a seemingly fathomless pit of despair and anguish whilst taking on all of the new content in Rimworld Anomaly, with a pack of bioengineered super ghouls. All manner of geometric foes await: spheres, monoliths, obelisks, and, well, of course there's the cube, but that's mine. You can't have it. Anyway, right. Rimworld. We start with a trio of researchers, struck down from space by this strange monolith, which has left one of them, Harry, looking, well, not great. Oh wait, he's actually very pretty. The other two, Samson and Levi, have a lot of work to do, immediately deforesting the surrounding area and setting up a stone-cutting bench to carve out a home around this mysteriously alluring monolith. They'll start with skull spikes to set the tone early, and then make themselves an actual building to live in. Harry, meanwhile, begins his training. With a melee skill of 5, he's not much of a threat to anything larger than this fox. But give him time, he'll get there. And he's providing himself and his colleagues with plenty of food, too. Being a ghoul, killing is all he's actually capable of. Which is a pretty massive downside. But the upside is that he'll regenerate any wound, including completely missing parts, and all he needs is a steady supply of fresh meat to keep him from going completely feral and turning on the colonists. So I had wanted to get some of the basics set up a bit more before piercing the veil between dimensions, but the monolith has other ideas. So instead of letting it activate on its own accord, I sent Samson to investigate, which causes the monolith to do this. Wow. And now we can access the Anomaly research tree, the majority of which is currently unknown to us and will become accessible as we discover new entities. Naturally, then we'll start with entity containment, so that we can study them once they do show themselves. The area immediately goes grey and nasty, and then, as is tradition, a local rat goes mad and attacks, providing Harry with a quick snack. And then a hungry tree emerges, a harbinger tree. It wants meat, but I have none to spare, so it can go hungry. I'm sorry, meat tree. I don't think you actually do anything anyway, so, that's just life. It's very transactional on the Rim. So here's our first actual entity. A sight stealer has been revealed as it sprints towards Harry the Ghoul. After he beats it up, but importantly doesn't kill it, we'll hastily put a containment platform in our storeroom so that Levi can drag it back to be chained up and studied. We named the faction Ghoul Worshippers, but to prove that Samson and Levi haven't lost their sense of humour in the crash, they named the settlement Ghoulish, with an H, because ghouls. You get it. Anyway, we thank the Sky Daddies for a fresh delivery of milk, and now we've sort of got the basics of a base coming together. There's just one final touch. A horseshoe stick, which is sat right behind the monolith. Please try not to hit it with the horseshoes, it really upsets the dark gods. And that distracts them from playing this video's sponsor, World of Tanks. A free-to-play online tank combat game that lets you take command of tank destroyers and artillery as well as light, medium and heavy tanks. Meaning you can either rush in with heavy armor and big guns, hide in a bush and scout for your team waiting for the right moment to strike, or sit back and snipe from across the map. Whichever playstyle you prefer. You'll take part in massive battles across a varied set of over 40 arenas, ranging from close quarters urban and industrial zones to open deserts and fields. Learn to play accordingly and help your team destroy the competition to take victory, which earns you experience, letting you modify and upgrade your tank as well as work your way up the tech tree towards the really big stuff. Use my link from the description or pinned comment below to claim a free Tier 6 Cromwell B British medium tank, 250,000 credits, 7 days of premium account, and also 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each. If you're already playing World of Tanks, you can get 3 days of premium, a 7-day rental of the Premium Centurion Mark V Tier 8, and the checkered bargain camo pattern. Very good. Back on the Rim, we've got our first raid. The Toxfolk have sent a single genie with a knife to try and put a stop to our dark studies. Nice shot, Samson. Tico Joseph. It'd be nice to recruit you, so stop crawling away. Come on, it's time for bed. And by bed, I mean the floor next to this angry sight stealer that really hates being in captivity. It's probably quite important to try and get as much converting and recruiting done early in this playthrough, because I haven't talked about it yet, but we're using the new ideology meme, Inhuman. This means that followers of the Ghoul supremacy ideology don't really like to think of themselves as human, and will, if pushed to breaking point, renounce their humanity and sort of just go numb. Which comes with some upsides in that they won't feel much pain anymore and don't care about most normal human stressors, but also, well, when you've rejected humanity, your social and artistic skills tend to suffer quite badly. Anyway, all of that is to say, conversion and recruiting is going to get very difficult once all of our colonists have zero social skill. Rather blessedly, Tico has actually been converted very quickly, and it turns out living in a Sight Stealer's shed makes you pretty unhappy, so he's the first example of somebody going inhuman, which, as I mentioned before, basically makes you some kind of psychopath plus. Anyway, having all of our goods stored in a room designated as a prison isn't a good idea, so now we have this room over here to pull prison duties. We've also researched entity containment now, meaning we can expand our collection of entities when more show up. And we'll be researching bioferrite harvesting so that we can collect this handy new material from them too. And then Sitush the Itakin drops from the sky. He'd make quite a good researcher, and hey, he's already a psychopath, which is handy. Into the pit they go, before, perhaps in retaliation, a single Itakin raider shows up and cuts out one of Harry's eyes before being shot to death. But, it'll grow back. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, being trapped alone together in this situation, Levi and Samson have become lovers. I suppose I get it. At this rate, they're never going to have a mental break and will carry their human shame for years, which would have its benefits. So we'll make them a shared bedroom at some point, but right now another ghoul has just landed from the sky, ripe for studying. Quick, build a containment platform in the prison. So, as our dark study progresses, a lonely Neanderthal apparently wants in on the getting gunned down thing that's been happening here a lot lately and runs directly into Tico's shotgun. Then a little while later, whilst Harry is out deer hunting, Tico the genie decides to finally join the crew. Great. With 3 functional members, things should now start to speed along. So we'll start work on a bedroom for the lovebirds to free up beds for Tico and eventually Sitush. But then a quest comes in from the Empire, who are asking us to deal with a trio of angry raccoons with a legendary nerve spiker as the reward. I'm pretty sure Harry can do that alone, so of course we accept. And after a few moments of mortal raccoon combat, we're good and Samson takes her prize. A neat new weapon which we'll have plenty of opportunities to demonstrate later. Oh wait, here we go. A ghoul is attacking. Once again, Levi will hurry to build containment for it whilst the others defend. The nerve spiker, alongside just dealing damage, momentarily stuns enemies. It also shoots bright red projectiles, which is kind of the most important thing about it to me. Anyway, unfortunately Tico blew the ghoul's brains out, so we can't capture it, but nonetheless it's good to be making a dedicated containment zone for future entities, rather than just kind of scattering them throughout the base. The constellation prize is another Sight Stealer anyway, which Harry beats to the floor, ready for capture. Lovely. He even bit out one of its eyes. Who's the Sight Stealer now, bitch? Predictably, Samson is pregnant. It'll be a long time before the baby occurs, but hopefully an extra pair of hands a few years down the line will be a boon rather than a burden. Only time will tell. Research has finished on a device called an electro-harvester, which allows us to directly suck electricity from captured entities. I like this idea, and we'll set it up shortly in the new containment room, just as soon as Samson goes and mines some steel. The Sky Daddies, with their almighty milkers, must have heard about Samson's pregnancy, as they've sent a shipment of baby food. How very thoughtful. Anyway, the containment room is just about ready, with 4 platforms at around 120 containment strength, more than enough for the basic entities that we're currently holding. However, every newfangled device like the electro and bioferrite harvesters decrease the containment strength by irritating the entities. On that note, this electro harvester generates 480 watts from these 3 at the cost of 25 containment, making escapes considerably more likely. I don't know about that. The bioferrite harvester is making a whopping 4 per day, which is also not great, but that stuff is far less optional as we'll need it for almost everything anomalous. I notice now also that the electro harvester occasionally burns whatever entity it's harvesting, so unless you want your warden to spend a load of time healing up entities, you probably want to be using this on entities who regenerate naturally. And while I was busy explaining that, Levi convinced Sittersh the Wookiee to get on board. He's of particular value because it means we can perhaps finally start on normal research rather than focusing exclusively on our dark studies. It's also at about this time that I snap out of the void obsession and realise I should probably advance the base a little in the regular ways, by making clothes, weapons, a temple, you know, the basics. A shaman merchant arrives with a breeding pair of pigs for sale. That would be nice. But we don't have the money. Hang fire just a second, fine pigmonger. Samson here will mine some gold to pay you with post-haste. Now the proud owner of some piggies will make them a quick and dirty pen in which to breed. They'll probably do other things there too, but that's what I'm interested in. I spotted Harry just standing listlessly in the containment room here, perhaps considering how lucky he is to be comparatively free. Or maybe he just likes staring at that particular brick. We'll probably never know. More importantly, a distress signal comes from a nearby settlement which promises powerful Archotech shards for dealing with an unknown threat. I suppose we should probably do something about that, so off go Harry, Samson and Tico to investigate. Oh my, it's very fleshy here. And scattered amongst the living but largely stationary flesh are some aptly named flesh beasts. They keep popping out of these holes in the ground, so after letting some of the beasts kill themselves on the powerless turrets, we'll swoop in to fill the holes and search for our loot. I was promised a shard. Perhaps it's in this flesh sack. Yep. Back home, whilst the settlement is effectively undefended, a small group of shamblers appear on the edge of the map, but they're just passing by, so they can be safely ignored. Or rather, we would be able to ignore them if the caravan didn't arrive home with Samson in an extremely poor mood, causing her to abandon her humanity and start wandering out. Directly towards them. Okay, so we're fighting them. And after a short and stupid combat, we can capture one of the shamblers, which would ordinarily crumble apart after a few days, but apparently are sustained while contained. Samson's fine. Everything's still attached anyway, which is the main thing. Her brain is completely ruined, but that's kind of the point of this colony. Now, thanks to Sittersh's hard work, we've researched microelectronics, meaning his little research space can get an upgrade. And in a similar vein, we should probably make individual bedrooms for him and Tico. The base progress is nice, but there's currently a warg in it hunting Levi. Tico steps in with his shotgun and puts it down mercifully quickly, but the damage was done. It ate one of Levi's most important fingers, his right middle. Use your right middle finger to scroll down and like the video now, because it's a long one and you might forget later. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe too while you're down there. Can you hear the ice cream truck? Do you want anything? Anyway, we finished researching the Void Provocation ritual now, thanks to a new feature in 1.5. Books. In this scenario, you start with one that slowly progresses this dark study whenever your colonist is reading it for recreation, which is very convenient actually, but it'll be a little while before we intentionally poke the darkness, because right now I'm learning that a random rescue quest I ignored was actually for one of Levi's relatives, Tobias, and now he's very upset. What a pain in the arse. It seems, however, that this death made space for new life on the Rim, because we've got our first little piglet. Very cute. Our next research to finish is bioferrite shaping, so we can finally start to use all of the weird stuff we're milking from our entities. Milking. Yeah. Now, as we near the end of our first year here, Samson is having that baby of hers. A healthy girl that we'll name Ghoulie, because that's a perfectly normal thing to do. Whilst little Ghoulie is writhing around on the floor covered in amniotic fluid, Dad walks right past to do some light reading of Scalda's incantations. He's just so great with kids. We're making good progress through the various gunsmithing research. Okay, thank you. Yeah. We're making good progress through the various gunsmithing researches, and the two boys also have their own bedrooms now. We also have a pretty massive excess of rice and taters, so we'll offload some to a bulk goods trader for a healthy infusion of silver that'll probably be handy later. Now, something you never want to see is that a grizzly bear is hunting a colonist, but that's the situation we're currently in. Samson helpfully stuns it, giving Harry and Tico time to get into position. Then, in a wonderful moment, Tico holds his shotgun to the side of its head and pulls the trigger. Thanks, Tico, that's very good. With bioferrite shaping researched, we can make these interesting looking masks, which don't really do much other than look cool, which, to be fair, is usually more than enough for me. Now, in order to expand the base, we'll have Harry tear apart some ancient mech ruins, allowing us to fully enclose and enlarge the pig zone with real walls. Later, a pig called Liork lands from the sky, so naturally we'll capture him. Look at him trying to crawl away. I couldn't help but find this funny. The way they move is like a dog scratching its asshole on the carpet. Anyway, here's this thing. A Warped Obelisk. I have literally no idea what it does. But there are a load of Wookiees, and I know what they do, so I should probably kill them. It turns out that they came here to remind me exactly how bad Rimworld's vanilla turrets are. A very poor showing indeed. After a bit of a struggle, we did get the job done, but now we need to rebuild our entrance. That was rough. And this is followed up near immediately by some Toxfolk, who are considerably easier to put down than the Wookiees. But after all of that, the prison is full. 3 Wookiees, Col, Colhern and Tail, and 2 Toxfolk, an Impid and a Waster. I have plans for the Wookiees, I'll show you in a moment, but first we have to calm down that Warped Obelisk. I don't know what it does, but I don't really feel like now is the time for it to do anything, to be honest, because now is the time for Ghouls. Starting with Colhern, because Wookiees are pretty good at melee combat. Very good. Wait, Levi just vanished. He got sucked into the obelisk and now he's in this grey labyrinth. Whoever built it has at least laid out a bedroll and a meal for him. Oh, maybe actually it was probably this guy's bedroll. Back in the real world, Col, one of the prisoners, perhaps understandably after what they just saw, went berserk. So now everyone's all beaten up and one of the Wasters is dead, but never mind. This alerted me to the fact that Col here has level 19 melee and the brawler trait. Ghoul infusion, ghoul infusion, ghoul infusion. His melee DPS is currently just under 5, but later on it will absolutely shoot to the moon. Anyway, back in the Grey Labyrinth, Levi has found a corpse wearing a set of recon armor. If he ever makes it out of here, that'll be fantastic. But we're not there yet, so after a sleep and delving a few rooms deeper, a statue teleports Levi to a completely different section of the labyrinth, where he finds, among other things, a pit. Which isn't usually good. Whilst he keeps fumbling around in the dark, Col is put to the test with a small gang of Muffalo, which was probably a bit of a stretch even for him, but he got it done. Back in the labyrinth, Levi is forced to fight off a single finger spike. It's lucky he got that armor, but even so, he lost another finger in the process. His left index finger this time. Another quite important one in my opinion. Stuck in the darkness of the labyrinth, freshly defingered, Levi breaks and relinquishes his ties to humanity. That's fair enough. It was probably quite impressive to keep him capable of basic social interaction for so long, honestly. But all good things come to an end. Like this labyrinth, because it looks like we've found the centre. An obelisk identical to the one back at base with a box on each side. One contains a shard, nice, and the other a void sight serum, which temporarily boosts somebody's dark study capability. Also nice. Now, please, Mr. Obelisk, let Levi come home. And sure enough, it does. It also dumps everything else that was left on the floor of the labyrinth out to our world, even stuff we hadn't discovered, like this set of marine armor on a corpse. Inhumanized people don't care about tainted apparel, by the way. After that ordeal, I reckon we ought to provoke the void. A ritual performed here, in this as yet largely unflawed room. The ritual is a success and something nasty will come for us soon. It also put Samson into a short psychic shock, but that's no big deal. The something nasty turned out not to be a single entity, but instead, a death pall, which darkens the area and continuously resurrects any corpses on the map. That shouldn't be too bad, we'll just stay inside the... Oh wait, there's a corpse stockpile right there in the base. Just quickly shift them outside and then we're probably good. Now this was the last basic entity we needed to discover before being able to attune the monolith, by the way. But it's probably best not to do that whilst fending off hordes of shambling skeletons. Wait, when did Tico lose an eye? Ugh, I don't know. There's also an eclipse right now. It's truly dark times indeed. Interestingly, the shamblers don't necessarily just run at kill boxes, they'll breach walls and doors, so most of our time during this death pool is spent repairing holes, which Levi keeps botching. Come on dude, get it together. If you didn't know it was coming, the death pool is pretty tough. Obviously now if I do an anomaly run in the future, I'll just deal with the skeletons better from the beginning, but for this first, almost entirely blind run, it was pretty spooky. When it eventually clears, we can put the rest of the corpses back down and finally emerge from our home. Research for geothermal power has finished, and we'll get to work on that in a bit, but right now the prisoners are being a pain. Tail the Wookiee has gone berserk again and dies of his injuries after being smacked about by Cole. In my opinion, that's on him, but then Leork the pig tried to make a break for it too, and was also killed by Cole. God damn it, we've been working on him for months. Ugh. Oh well, there's always more pigs. They literally rain from the sky, directly into our base. It's fine, we dealt with the problem, but it's very rude to drop pod into my home. We did capture one, but I'm not going to lead you on, the guy dies within a day. Entities fairly constantly escape containment, since the containment strength required to guarantee safety takes far more effort than it's really worth, especially when most of your entities are weak little sight stealers. After putting it down, we finally have a geothermal generator up and running, just in time for a defoliator ship to arrive with its retinue of 10 Minotaurs. That's a lot of small shotguns. But the ghouls are sturdy, and backed up by the now decently armed and armoured human colonists, they manage to pretty comfortably deal with this metallic new threat from space. Next, a large sickly man named Q Bum drops from the sky. With a fairly balanced set of skills, I figured he could be a good recruit, but it turns out sickly is considerably worse than I realised. You'll see. First though, we finally have something resembling a temple. So despite his pitiful social skill, we'll make Levi the colonist's moral guide to help speed up prisoner conversions. Speaking of prisoners, he's already developed gut worms. Nice. And a mere 2 days later, he's also come down with a plague. Okay, yeah, I think Q-Bum is gonna die in that filthy dirt box. Well, never mind. It's time to make the place more presentable and give it that nice SCP containment vibe with some concrete slabs. And then we'll give it a dystopic, unending workday vibe with something called a sleep suppressor in the lab. Before that's finished, Ghoulie becomes a child, immediately putting on a ritual mask and then falling asleep in the dining room. So now she can clean and haul. Very good. Anyway, back to dystopia. Now, whenever somebody's in the research lab, in this case Ghoulie, sleeping on the floor, they gradually build up sleep suppression, which annoys them, but also lowers their need for sleep, eventually entirely removing it so long as they stay within the radius of the suppressor. Whilst I was explaining that, another distress signal comes in, and since we'll pretty much always need shards, we immediately head over there with Sitosh and the ghouls. It's essentially identical to the first, fleshy masses and loads of flesh beasts to defend the loot. As you'd expect, this is no real challenge for the ghouls, primarily Cole, who usually just punches flesh beasts out of existence on the first hit. Once again, we find an Archotech shard in a flesh sack and run it straight back home. And back at base a little while later, it's day 96 and all is well. The sun is shining and... oh, a mech cluster. It feels a touch early for this, but alright. It's guarded by 4 small turrets and 1 larger, as well as a small group of mechs. So I'm going to try an unusual technique for taking this cluster on, where I just go and stand right next to all the enemies and hope I can destroy them before they kill anyone important. I'm not exactly sure how or why that worked, but I'm not going to complain. Everyone goes back to their work, leaving the ghouls behind to smash the climate adjuster. It's day 99, and that means it's high time we attuned this monolith, allowing more advanced entities to come and try to kill us. You can do this as soon as you've discovered all the basic entities, which we did ages ago. I just didn't feel the need to rush into it. We've been taking our relationship with the monolith slow, but not anymore. It's wearing sexy red lingerie now. And like most things in sexy red lingerie, it soon opens a pit full of flesh beasts, the first wave of which run at our base defences. In order to close this hole, we're going to have to go in. It's pretty nasty in here. The ghouls lead the way through the fleshy blockages and into the gangs of flesh beasts. The gang uncover a few small nests of insects and deal with them before finding a flesh sack which contains an Archotech leg. That's pretty damn tasty. And as much as I'd love to keep delving, at this point everyone's looking pretty beat up, so we'll head back up to the surface for a rest. And then a few days later we're back down in the pit. A turret pack drops from another flesh sack, reminding me that we actually started with 2 of those, just in time to run into this thing, a flesh meld. With a defending line of ghouls and 3 mini-turrets deployed behind the beast, it continuously squirts out smaller flesh beasts as it's injured. This is quite possibly the messiest fight I've ever seen. It's just a swirling mass of pink and grey. The meld itself dies pretty early, but its horde of flesh beasts take considerably more convincing to die. Tico is taking a punishing and ends up crawling around on the floor at roughly the same time as Harry the Ghoul is exploded by the explosive death of a mini-turret. But that's it. It's done. Harry the Ghoul was lost to the Fleshmass. A sad day, but at least Tico can be rescued. Samson carries him out whilst the remaining ghouls and colonists search the now collapsing undercave for any remaining loot. After that's all said and done, we're sitting on 4 shards right now. If we could get a good wave of prisoners, that would help create a handy little ghoul squad. But perhaps our focus would be better spent improving what we already have, because it turns out that Archotech leg can go onto our resident super ghoul, Col. And with an exotic goods trader stocking venom fangs and a power claw, oh yes, we're making a mecha ghoul. A small section of the containment room is being turned into an operating theatre, which is already in use whilst still under construction to fit Col's new bits, all of which push his melee DPS to 11.5. The gang perform a foul ritual to summon some flesh beasts, which we'll use to test Mecha Col. And yep, as expected, he's pretty lit. We needn't have wasted our time and hard-earned bioferrite on that ritual though, because now some cultists have shown up to do the same thing for us, repeatedly. By all means guys, go nuts. We need more flesh beasts. The second bunch they summoned actually popped up right inside of our base, which is quite convenient, but unfortunately the containment is full right now, so we can't capture any more. After that, the cultists give up and run at the colony. Keith and he are captured, and whilst patching them up, Samson miscarried. Oof. But also, I don't really want another child right now, so, you know, not the end of the world. I ask these 2 prisoners, if you like the Void so much, why don't you marry it? And then implant them with Archotech shards to turn them into ghouls. I'm not really sure that joke works, but in any case, they're part of the Ghoul squad now. Both baseline humans and neither with a particularly special melee skill. They're not exactly challenging Col, but more meat for the grinder always helps. And this is immediately demonstrated by getting too cocky and losing one of them, he to a mega sloth. Oops. But anyway, we're slowly making progress on possibly our most important bit of dark research. Ghoul enhancements. The reason I say slowly is because it's an advanced research, meaning we only make progress on it when studying advanced things, which we don't have many of. We have finished working on bioferrite weaponry though, meaning we can make both Hellcat rifles and a new kind of flamethrower. Tico quickly makes a Hellcat rifle and grabs it, finally replacing his trusty pump shotgun. Next, a threat that I'm personally quite used to, a horde of man-hunting cougars, which are held off fairly handily in the entrance. Some random shamblers and an infestation later, both of which are easily dealt with by Super Ghoul Col and friends. We finally finish work on the ghoul enhancements. Tico gets straight to work on some ghoul barbs and then Samson fits them, taking Col's DPS from 12.9 all the way up to 19.45, and also making him look pointy. From here on out, most of our time is spent actively provoking the Void to send us new and interesting horrors. The first of which is Blood Rain. Rain that makes you angry. Now you can't capture and study Blood Rain, obviously, so that's not exactly what I'd have asked for. We just have to build a roof over our pigs lest they go mad and try to eat us. But we can't roof the whole map, meaning that the base entrance is clogged up with angry animals, including this rhino. But it doesn't last all that long and we're immediately back to normal business, which means Samson is pregnant again. They're quite productive, her and Levi. Jane the elderly brawler has dropped from the sky, thinking her days of fighting were over. But with the power of ghoulification, she'll brawl again. She'll brawl this new mech cluster, which looks considerably scarier than the last with the addition of an inferno cannon. It does also, however, have walls, so we can probably cheese it by sending the ghouls around into the minimum ranges of the turrets, whilst the colonists back them up from the comparative safety of the walls. I actually don't think this was much more effective than just standing in the open, if I'm being completely honest. But thanks to Jane's heroic sacrifice and the extremely strong hands of the zombie Wookiees, the gang were able to get it done once again, and the defoliator can be ripped down. Later on, we will, in theory, be able to resurrect ghouls, so we'll bury her in the base with the intent to exhume her for resurrection later. But I will warn you that my memory for this kind of thing is extremely poor. Anyway, it's time to poke the void once more, after which the skies begin to darken. We get a handy notification warning us that pretty soon things are going to be very dark, and that the darkness is going to be very bad for us. So sure enough, darkness does fall, and whenever in the darkness, people and ghouls get scratched and clawed at. Out in the darkness are 3 Noctoliths, which need to be destroyed to lift the darkness. So out go the ghouls on a little mission. Unsurprisingly, after destroying the first Noctolith, some nasties come for us. Noctols, creatures of the night. After their fight, Keith collapses dead, which is a shame, but we left some Noctols alive, so Samson can go and capture one for studying. Sure, she gets clawed up a bit on the way out there and back, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices for science. And Noctols provide advanced science, so more would be good. Luckily, there's 2 more Noctoliths to break then. So once they're healed, the ghouls ride out once more, and Levi brings home another Noctol. Another group of Noctols randomly attack the base, giving us even more to imprison before heading out to get the last Noctolith, finally ending the darkness. In total, we brought in 6 of the things. Also, each Noctolith dropped a shard, meaning we're pretty flush with the things now. I think we'll probably use them for more sleep suppressors, since colonists being inhumanized nicely counters the small mood debuff they give. Another distress signal comes in and we'll get to it in some time, but first, we've covered Colin Barbs, now it's time to give him armor plating, which alongside his genetic sturdiness, lowers his incoming damage to 38% at the cost of slowing him down a little. But that's fine, he's not a shock trooper, he's a terrifying zombie Hulk. Speaking of terrifying zombie Hulks, here's your mum now. Wait, sorry, here's a load of them now, running at the door to the colony. These guys have a really annoying AI. They like to run away from melee combatants in order to yeet spines at you from range. Like this. But anyway, we eventually deal with the problem and hastily build containment for the 3 of them that are left writhing around on the floor. So now, next to a very angry contained Gore Hulk, we'll implant Colhern's armor plates and barbs to make him at least sort of close to Col's power levels. Look at my 2 special Ghoul Kings. I love them as children and will cry if either of them dies. Some more entities tried to escape, not surprising given the increasing numbers of them in each room, and one of the Noctols was killed in the scuffle. It's a shame, but we move on. Because this has just kind of shown up. It's perfectly spherical and thousands of years old. Just like your mum. But it doesn't seem to actually do anything. Just like your mum. Tico rolls it over to a containment platform like some kind of dung beetle, and Samson begins studying it for a decent amount of advanced research. It emits a field of pain in the immediate vicinity, which worsens over time as its activity level increases, so we'll suppress it to around 70% because unless it does something else, I suspect we can weaponize this pain field in our death tunnel. We'll see. Samson managed to carry this baby to full term, and is having it during a solar eclipse in the same hospital bed where the ghouls get their implants, next to the angry Gore Hulk. That's a pretty omen-filled birth, but nonetheless he's a healthy baby boy and I named him Troll. Because I can. Oh, right, that distress call from a few minutes back. I'll send Tico and the boys to investigate. It's much the same as all of the other ones we've visited so far. Fleshy masses, flesh beasts and sacks of shinies. This time it's an excellent quality recon helmet to replace the old and beaten up one that Tico was wearing. And of course, another shard. Back at home we're making progress on the sphere. which is being called the Nociosphere. Apparently we can now teleport it into an enemy force and have it rampage through them. A massive pack of shamblers just entered the area, and I considered sending the sphere, but we have bigger issues right now. Someone here is somehow wrong. There's something hiding among us. Ghoulie found this little bit of grey flesh. We have no idea who it came from or what it means for the colony, but after Sitersh analyses it, we've identified the biosignature for Astropox P4, which currently means nothing. We need more flesh samples, and until then, we just live in suspense. Whilst we wait for more flesh samples, ghouls arrive. They appear to be coded to just ignore your shiny trap hallways and kill boxes in favour of smashing your back doors in. In this case, they just happened to attack from the side of the base that contains our defences, but that was entirely luck. Clearly my turret placement here is pretty crap, and you'd think I'd change things up after having my front door blown open for the second time when the turrets explode. And for once, you might actually be right to think that. But first, the High Stellarch of the Empire has gotten in touch and wants to drop something weird off, and will give us a Masterwork Nerve Spiker in return. Sure, why not? It's a spine. When placed in containment, the rest of the entity reveals itself. It's a Revenant, and I think we'll be keeping this one extra secure with a little shard-powered entity inhibitor, because it's scary looking. Now though, it's the moment that the sphere has been waiting for. The pig people arrive to besiege us. Go, Pain Sphere, go! Huh. Oh. Wow. The Pain Sphere really can, in the parlance of the youth, go off, King. And then it just pops back home like nothing even happened. Nice. This definitely doesn't feel like some kind of monkey's paw type situation where one finger just curled and we're headed towards a horrible sphere-based disaster. Anyway, moving on, we've researched a new method for making our colonists work better. We're already keeping them awake, so why not make them go faster too? With a frenzy inducer, colonists nearby will move and work faster at the expense of having exclusively violent mental breaks. It's kind of like psychically transmitting cans of Monster Ultra, the white one that boomers drink, right into Tico's mind as he works on a void sculpture. Cool. Also, we've found and studied enough grey flesh now to start surgically inspecting people for anything weird. Let's start with Samson. She spends all day around the entities, so one of them probably gave her something. Ah, well. If it isn't metal horrors. It turns out she also transmitted one to Samson whilst making little baby troll. Thankfully they're actually pretty easy to deal with. Tico and the ghouls gun them down whilst Samson and Levi sleep off the trauma of them bursting free. Alright, poke the void once again, guys. We need new horrors. And down comes a new obelisk. A twisted one. We'll figure out what that does soon enough, but back at the base it's time to shift things around a bit. We're moving the ritual area into its own room and placing a fabrication bench in the now freed up space. And then another infestation later, once again dealt with easily thanks to the ghouls, we're yelling at the void even more. That's pretty much the order of business for the rest of the game. Yell at the void, receive weird monsters or events. This time it's a flesh mass, and it's growing. It has these nodules, but the ghouls are already in place and working on them. The spitters are, I suppose, some kind of organic artillery, but I don't intend to find out. And these nerve bundles are what we actually need to destroy to ultimately deal with the problem. After destroying the first, we've got to give it a while to let the flesh mass ruminate and think about what it's done before it will generate more nodules. But eventually, after much wading around in squirming meat and analysing enough of its tissue, we can make the heart of the mass go into some kind of cardiac arrest. It left behind its nucleus, which we can study and contain. And then the power goes out. It turns out there's massive fires raging outside, and they've burned down one of our generators. Nice. Also, our lovely pain sphere will soon stop responding to suppression. Apparently we have to send it to attack a large enemy force and then it will just go away. But also, somewhere between worrying and fantastic, is that the Fleshmass Nucleus is just making meat. Yeah, it just creates twisted meat every now and then. I guess it feeds the ghouls. Alright, anyway, you know what I always say. Always be provoking. Normally something happens pretty immediately afterwards, but, not this time, which is kind of worrying. We'll buy a surprisingly cheap cataphract helmet for Samson while we wait, and then this teenager shows up. He's, well, I don't think there's a whole lot going on behind those disturbingly spaced out eyes, you know? Nonetheless, he asks to join, and I suppose I'm up for it. After all, he can do this. Which is nice. Gross, but also nice. Unsurprisingly, the ability to tear apart any organic creature with his mind doesn't come for free, and barely a day later he's well and truly in Struggle Town, saying that pretty soon his mind will crumble, making him incapable of pretty much everything. More pressingly though, a gang of wasters drop into our home and start yeeting tox grenades in massive quantities. It's in this combat that I learned that my ghouls aren't immune to the effects of tox gas, because after the fight, Cole goes down to it. For some reason I just assumed that they would be. But this does give me the idea of fitting them with anti-tox organs and then arming my colonists with tox launchers to create shock troopers that will keep enemies locked down in the gas clouds. Anyway, that's for another time, because right now, the Twisted Obelisk that I keep forgetting about to the north has spawned a meat tree, Eastwood's mind is starting to crumble, and the Nociosphere is no longer suppressible. But at least we're still learning from the meat sphere. I like the meat sphere. It's simple and easy to please. Back to Eastwood, his brain is on the brink of collapse, which we'd need a healer mech serum to prevent apparently, so we're building him a cryptosleep casket instead and putting him away to one side for later. There's another death pall resurrecting corpses all over the place, but it's okay, we just sit around inside for a while. And while we're in here, we might as well stay awake, increasing the coverage of sleep suppressors even more. Here's our current progress in the Entity Codex, by the way, whilst we're stuck inside. Just 5 more advanced entities before we can further attune to the monolith. The death pall finally clears, and whilst it was ongoing, there was an absolutely massive fire raging, probably helping to clear out some of the corpses. Our understanding of the Twisted Obelisk has advanced to the point that we can now activate it to intentionally induce void mutations in our colonists. We'll immediately send Samson to do so, and she gets a Fleshmass stomach, which means she can never get food poisoning. That's not very useful in a nutrient-paced colony, but hey, it is what it is. It's time to expand our arsenal, so Tico makes an excellent incinerator, which Sitosh will scoop up real quick. Some colonists have arrived, intending to drive us mad with very rude and angry chanting. And as much as I'd love to test the new flamethrower on them, we've still got that dangerous sphere to get rid of. Yeah, I'd expect that an Archotech death sphere can probably handle a group of knife-wielding maniacs pretty well. Nonetheless, 3 of them do actually slip through to our little kill zone, and in the classic vanilla Rimworld style, they make it to and destroy 3 of our turrets before Cole gets there to intervene. One of the cultists has a flesh whip, a melee augmenting tentacle, so I figure we'll take her in and ghoulify her to see how well that performs. Well, her melee DPS is 2, but, you know, whatever, it's provoking time. What arrives from the void this time is a corpse. Samson's corpse, specifically. Which, well, that's pretty horrid. We need to study it. While we do, this thing shows up. A Revenant. Like the one we have in Containment, but, you know, not in Containment. And it's after Levi, ignoring everybody attacking it and staring lovingly into his eyes before running off and disappearing. Literally disappearing, completely invisible. So Levi is just in a trance now until that Revenant is dealt with. Luckily, it left behind a chunk of flesh that Samson can study to make it easier to find again in the future, but for now, we're just a man down. So I suppose it's a good time for the pigfolk to arrive. With the addition of Sitosh's incinerator, my combats are all just total chaos. I think I like it this way though. I kind of wish I could flameproof the ghouls, but it's not particularly likely that they'll ever burn to death, so it's probably fine if they occasionally catch fire anyway. Afterwards, let's mutate Sitosh at the Twisted Obelisk as a reward for his good behaviour in combat. Just like Samson, he also gets a fleshy stomach. Or, well, fleshier than usual, I guess. And the Revenant is back, after Ghoulie this time. And just after it's hypnotised her, Samson collapses, tormented by her replicant corpse. Apparently they did something it doesn't like. I have no idea what exactly, to be honest, but I suspect the pigs ate it. which is rough, but you know. Anyway, she'll be back up in a day and the corpse will just magically reappear somewhere nearby because it's a creep like that. Sitosh, armed with his flamer and a pack of flares, chases the Revenant out of the base. For quite a while he and the ghouls chase it around, dealing good damage but eventually losing it once more. Perhaps we should have studied this flesh chunk first, because we'll now be notified when a colonist is nearby the Revenant, making it considerably easier to track down. So with that in mind, everyone not currently hypnotized heads out to hunt it down. After revealing it for the third time now, I tried to get everyone to attack it before realizing that it's just dead. The Revenant does not wish to be observed. Fair enough. And at some point in all of this action, Tico got an infected wound which quite nearly killed him thanks to Samson, our main doctor, being in a corpse coma. He's fine, but he almost wasn't fine. And that's the kind of nail-biting drama that makes it into my videos. Now, things have finally turned peaceful again, so it's time to provoke the void. For a change, we just get a bunch of meaty entities running at the base. Chimeras. Nothing too scary. They're apparently going to wait for their moment to strike, but since a lot of our weaponry involves spraying out a load of fire now, I'm not going to hang around, heading out to get them instead. And it went quite well, but then as we were leaving, Samson's corpse just shows up again, waiting to be studied. I think it's time now to give Levi a fleshy mutation at our good friend the Twisted Obelisk. And oh, look at that. His right arm was replaced with a flesh whip, which is convenient since he was missing a finger on that side anyway. So now the whole arm is just one big, twitchy finger. Whilst Samson is resting in hospital, her doppelcorpse is taking the opportunity to give her bed a try. And having a corpse in his bed, Levi, rather understandably, chooses to sit next to the sleep suppressor and play an eternal game of poker with Sitosh. Or it could have been eternal if Sitosh didn't get freaked out by Levi's tentacle and leave. Finally though, after enough study, Samson has figured out how to destroy her corpse. And it should probably be her to do it. I think it would feel strange to watch somebody else destroy your own corpse, right? A little while later, Wee Troll has grown up to be a child and joins Ghoulie in her near-endless cleaning and hauling. However, Ghoulie is actually 10 now, and in that growth moment she becomes psychically hypersensitive, meaning that from now on she'll take the lead in dark rituals. From an exotic goods trader we grab the tech print for specialised limbs, since power claws are really good on ghouls, and at this point we have a massive amount of bioferrite just sitting around, so we're replacing most of the floors and some of the walls in the containment zones. The floors give a bonus to containment strength and the walls just have 600 hit points, which is considerably more than the slate that we had there before, and that also contributes to containment. Alright, void provocation time, which leads to yet another obelisk, corrupted this time. We could use some more space, so we'll make a small extension to the west of the base here, just in time for those hate chanters to come back. After heading out and burning what I thought was all of them alive, I realised that there was actually another group, and they've destroyed the last of our turrets before meeting the small trap hallway followed by Sitosh's incinerator. I don't think we'll bother rebuilding the turrets. Once more we'll provoke the void, because that's really all we do now. We poke the darkness beyond the veil, and shortly after doing that, Ghoulie finally breaks, inhumanizing. It took her long enough, but there we go. A little while later, the void gives us a gift. The one you've all been waiting for. A seemingly inert golden cube. There is something about it though. The way it catches the light, it's quite fascinating. Anyway, we'll bring it in and then send Levi to get another mutation, which hilariously turns out to be another tentacle arm. Look at him go, he's a real eldritch horror now. However, our very own eldritch horror is quickly becoming obsessed with the cube. As our study of it advances, Samson announces what we all already knew. It's basically the One Ring, but you can't wear it to turn invisible on account of it not having a hole for your finger. Another distress signal comes in, so whilst Sitosh is off with the ghouls dealing with that, we'll start to set up some hydroponics and a brewery, because why not make beer, I guess? I don't know. Later, whilst the rest of the crew are making another generator, Samson is studying the corrupted obelisk when all of a sudden, out pops, well, Samson. She has a bit of a penchant for getting duplicated, it seems. I guess I won't complain about having another Samson, but you know how this goes. There'll be a horrific downside any moment. Oh, and sure enough, the duplicate's mind isn't right, crumbling away just like poor young Eastwood's was. So we'll enjoy her while we can, or most of us will. Levi's just playing with his cube. Oh, and now Sitash has become obsessed with it too. I can see where this is going. Samson will study the cube basically as much as it's possible to, presumably then we'll be able to do something about it. But anyway, now seems like a good time to provoke the void, immediately after which one of the Gore Hulks escapes containment, which is fine, it's easy enough to put it down, but instead of returning it to containment, Sitash is just playing with the goddamn cube. And oh dear, we're finding grey flesh again. Someone's got some kind of infection or parasite. After studying a few bits of flesh, we'll start systematically inspecting people for anything weird. But first, Levi is building a little cube statue. This will happen a lot. They really like the cube. Sitash is the first to be surgically inspected by Samson, and apparently she finds nothing. But alarmingly, we are told that doctors may lie sometimes, which is just fantastic. And then even more alarmingly, we find some grey flesh for another biosignature. So we've got two different varieties of nasty on the go here at the same time. So Tico is next, and they also find nothing, and then, oh, whoops, I let Dark Samson's mind go off the edge, and she can only fight and do art now. Well, it could be worse, so we move on. Tico inspects Samson, no anomalies. Tico inspects Ghoulie, no anomalies. Tico inspects Troll, no anomalies. The ghouls can also be inspected, and we'll get to them, but first, another bloody Revenant is here, going straight for Dark Samson, which is honestly the best outcome for us here. Fire keeps the Revenant revealed for a short while, so as it runs off, we'll have Sitash follow it out with his... Wait, Sitash? Oh, god damn it, he's making a cube out of dirt. Well, the rest try to locate it with flares, but no luck. We'll have to wait for it to attack again. At this point, everyone, including the ghouls, has been surgically inspected, and we've used a variety of doctors to do so, and found nothing, so everybody is just lying to me. Oh, and also Samson is now into the cube too. Everybody spends a good chunk of their time building statues of it and playing with it. But in situations like this, what else can we do but provoke the void? We're rewarded this time with a swarm of gape-mawed monsters. As usual, we'll go meet the threat outside to avoid setting our home on fire too badly, and as their names imply, these things have large mouths and try to swallow some folks whole. But with a combination of fire and ghoul claws, we prevail, taking in 2 of them to study. But what we really need to study is the goddamn cube. I have no idea how we've not made any progress after studying it so much now. I swear it's going to be the end of this colony. After all we've been through, we're being brought low by cube obsession. Right, anyway, the Revenant is back again, hypnotizing Levi. So we'll leave Sitash behind to study its chunk of flesh and send the rest out to chase it, keeping an eye on its rough location. With enough flares, Revenants aren't really too bad to deal with so long as you have a good number of colonists to make up for the fact that 1 or 2 will be asleep by the time you can realistically finish it off. Some more of that Unnatural Darkness is coming now, which is annoying because we've actually now discovered all of the advanced entities, allowing us to awaken the Monolith and end this once and for all. It's just that you can't do that during the darkness. So I thought we'd use the skip abduction ritual to get some ghoul fodder in the meantime, but mid-ritual, Levi disappeared to make a statue of the cube. Deep breaths, Hazor. Deep breaths. Dark Samson suddenly died, and it turns out she was hiding a metal horror inside of her. Did we ever inspect her? I can't remember, but in any case, rest in peace, Dark Samson. We hardly knew ye. We made her a sarcophagus of bioferrite because that seems appropriate and we have more of it than we can use. And, oh yeah, the darkness. We'll quickly deal with those noctiliths just as we did before using our ghouls. We don't need to go into it, you've seen this before. So alright, we can intentionally duplicate people now at the Corrupted Obelisk, which is neat, but we've really got to push to the finish before Levi and eventually everybody completely lose their minds to the cube. We stick some detoxifier kidneys into Levi and dupe him to quickly check something. No, unfortunately, nothing artificial gets duped. No free Archotech bits here. His tentacles do though, so we'll make his dupe into a ghoul because that would be funny. And then we'll skip abduct for real this time, bringing over Billy, who we will also, unsurprisingly, make into a ghoul. As with everything else, people duplication isn't free, and the original Levi is gradually getting lower and lower consciousness. The tooltip says this won't be lethal though, so it's fine. Anyway, you only live once. Samson, awaken the obelisk. Let's do it. Immediately afterwards, these void structures arrive, bringing unnatural darkness with them and waiting to be activated in order to fully connect with the void. As you might expect though, doing so makes bad things happen. Mainly it attracts a whole load of monsters, a lot of which made it into our mostly undefended base. So with that in mind, before activating the structures any further, we'll clean up the map and try to plan for the waves of nasties. For a start, our power cables keep burning away, so Tico spends some time reconnecting the base to power, and then all of a sudden a load of angry replicants appear. Presumably the Corrupted Obelisk didn't get suppressed and unleashed its awful power, so now everyone has to, well, kill themselves. Sort of. I actually especially enjoyed watching Sittersh set himself and Samson on fire. But somewhere along the way, Levi lost his leg. And whilst we're technically capable of making him something decent, right now the best we can do is a peg leg. I'm sorry Levi, but you're just gonna have to deal with it. Then we can activate the second structure, plunging the world into darkness and summoning another 3 structures. One of which is actually rather conveniently right in our front door, so that's a free win. Just leaving 2 more. The small horde of flesh beasts that it drew in can be burned to death in the entry hallway, which only nearly set a Revenant free. Alright, unfortunately before we can go any further, Levi the Ghoul needs to be euthanized because his very existence is capping Levi Prime's consciousness to 10%. But after that sad premature end to Levi the Ghoul's life, out in the darkness, Sittersh and the Ghouls can clear and activate the second structure before running back inside to help defend. Hordes of Shamblers and Gore Hulks break into a few different points and need putting down, mainly by Col, who also deals with a load of entities escaping from the lab. At this point we'll just kill escapees. What do I care? We've researched everything there is to know. So, okay, 1 more structure. Let's go. And Tico's making a cube. Alright Sittersh, get out there and take his place. With the last structure activated, the monolith starts to pulsate and twist. And in a few hours we'll be able to connect with the void. Until then, we simply need to defend it. I'm very glad we made that incinerator. Fire-based weaponry goes pretty hard against unarmoured monstrous opponents. And in no time at all, the monolith is ready for us. Ghoulie, this is what you were born for. Connect with the void. She's transported to a dark place. Presented with a writhing sphere and given the choice to either embrace the void or... well, it doesn't really matter what the other option is. Embrace the void, little Ghoulie. Ghoulie steps into the void and the black ocean floods into her, overwhelming every sense, suffusing every cell in her body and every thought in her mind. The void node has been refocused away from the world towards one single person. The void structures scream, torn from their otherworldly foundation and then blink out of existence. Ghoulie has embraced the void. She returns from the other side, void-touched, no longer needing sleep or comfort, much more psychically sensitive and with an incredible regenerative ability. And now, we're safe. It took 233 days for the gang and their ghouls to conquer the void, claiming its powers for themselves. Just barely though. That was seriously tough, but the challenge was fun, even if at times very frustrating. Please consider giving the video a like and even maybe share it with someone to make my suffering worth it. When I started this playthrough I didn't realise I was embarking on such an odyssey, or that my script would end up being almost 11,000 words. Anyway, maybe we'll see little Ghoulie again in the future, or maybe not. But either way, please, whatever you do, remain indoors. Who knows where the void will turn up next? It could be just outside your door. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.